on the bridge of the Vindicator was thick with tension. Captain Lirian of the Kior'Va Empire stood motionless, his deep violet eyes locked onto the viewing screen. Before him, a human battleship hovered in the vast emptiness of space, its dark hull reflecting distant starlight like a predator waiting to strike. "This is a mistake," muttered Commander Reich, his mandibles clicking with unease. "The humans have defied the Empire before. We should strike now before they—" "No," Lirian interrupted, his voice cold. "We don't kill humans." Reich recoiled, slightly. "Sir, they are a threat to our dominion. They have refused to submit. They have fought against us." Lirian turned sharply, his heavy cloak swirling around him. "And yet, they do not exterminate. They do not erase. Every species they encounter, even those that stand against them, they offer mercy, coexistence, or, at worst, containment. They do not kill unless they must." His gaze returned to the screen. "That is why they terrify us." A deep silence settled over the bridge. Then, a chime. A transmission request. The screen flickered, and a human appeared. Admiral Vasquez of the Terran Defense Fleet. Her dark brown eyes bore into Lirian's with unreadable intensity. "Captain Lirian," she said evenly, "we received your message. You asked for a parley." Lirian took a slow breath. "Yes." Vasquez leaned forward slightly. "And what do you want, Captain?" A pause. Then, "The truth." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Even Reich looked uncertain. Vasquez studied him carefully. Then, with the barest hint of a smirk, she said, "How much truth can you handle, Captain?" Captain Lirian exhaled slowly. "I can handle more than you think, Admiral." Admiral Vasquez tilted her head. "Is that so?" She tapped a few controls on her console, and the star map behind her flickered to life, displaying a region of space Lirian recognized immediately, the Kior'Va Empire's outer colonies. "Then tell me, Captain," Vasquez continued, "why is it that we are the ones holding back?" Lirian's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Vasquez crossed her arms. "We have the firepower to wipe out every Kior'Va world from here to the galactic core. We've had it for years, and yet we don't. Do you know why?" Commander Reich scoffed. "Because you lack the resolve." Vasquez's expression darkened. "No, Commander. Because we know the cost of genocide. Because we remember what it means to be on the losing side of history. And because, unlike you, we don't kill unless we must." Silence. Lirian's mind raced. He had seen human battle reports. He had studied their tactics. And yet, the brutality he had always assumed they were capable of had never fully manifested. Humans fought viciously, but not with reckless extermination. Even their greatest enemies were given choices: prison, exile, assimilation. And the ones who chose death, that was their choice, not humanity's. "Captain," Vasquez said, softer now, "you called for a parley. So tell me, what is it you really want?" Lirian hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he admitted, "I want to understand." Vasquez studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "Good," she said. "Then let's begin." Lirian stepped away from the command console, his mind swirling with calculations. Understanding the humans. Could that even be possible? Vasquez's expression remained unreadable. Let's start with a question, Captain. What do you think we are? Commander Reich scoffed again. You are reckless, unstructured, a species that stumbled into space by sheer stubbornness. Vasquez didn't even blink. And yet, here we are, holding the line, winning wars we never wanted. Lirian shot Reg a warning glance before speaking. You are unpredictable. You make allies where others would see enemies. You spare when you should strike. And yet, your kind has survived, even flourished in a galaxy that should have crushed you. Vasquez nodded. So, tell me, Captain, what do you think is more dangerous? A species that conquers through fear, or one that refuses to? That question lingered in the air, heavy with implications. Lirian glanced at the tactical readouts. The human fleet, outnumbered 3-1, still refused to fire first. That restraint gnawed at him. In every war the Kior'Va had fought, the strongest had ruled and the defeated had been erased. Yet, humanity, they didn't play by those rules. Why? Lirian asked finally. Why don't you strike when you have the chance? Vasquez exhaled as if this was a conversation she had prepared for. Because winning is more than just surviving, Captain. It's about who you become in the process. The words struck a nerve. Lirian's people had ruled through fear for centuries. And yet, fear had only bred rebellion, endless conflict. What if there was another way? Reg, sensing his captain's hesitation, took a step forward. This is weakness, he hissed. You cannot trust them. Vasquez didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward. Then, bro, the silence on the bridge was suffocating. Every officer, every crew member held their breath, waiting for Reg's next move. The Kior'Va commander's hand hovered over the targeting console. His claws twitched. His breath came in ragged. Bursts. The human fleet remained motionless, their weapons powered but unfired. Admiral Vasquez hadn't even reached for her controls. She was daring him. Commander, Lirian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Stand down. Reich's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing. You cannot be serious. They mock us. They test us. If we do not strike, they will see us as weak. Lirian took a slow step forward. And yet, they do not fire. Reich bared his teeth. Because they are trying to break us. Or because they are giving us a choice. Lirian countered, his voice steady. The first real choice we've ever had. Reich's mandibles clicked furiously. His muscles tensed, torn between loyalty and fury. But then, with a low growl, he withdrew his hand from the controls. Vasquez exhaled through her nose. Smart choice. Lirian turned back to the screen. This isn't over. Vasquez nodded. No, it's just beginning. The star map behind her changed, shifting to a new image. One that made Lirian's blood run cold. A third fleet. One neither human nor Kior'Va. Sleek obsidian ships with crimson markings, arranged in a formation that spoke of ruthless precision. The Xal'Dar, Lirian whispered. Rag stiffened. Impossible. They vanished centuries ago. Vasquez's expression darkened. They didn't vanish, Captain. They were waiting. The realization hit Lirian like a meteor impact. The Xal'Dar had been a nightmare from his ancestors' time, a species so efficient at extermination that entire empires had been erased from history. Their disappearance had been a mystery. Now, It was no longer a mystery. We picked up their movements near the galactic rim, Vasquez continued. They're heading toward your empire's core worlds. Lirian's throat tightened. How many ships? Vasquez's lips pressed into a thin line. Too many. Rack's voice was barely a whisper. We are not prepared for this. Lirian's claws dug into the armrest of his chair. For the first time, he understood why the humans had refused to strike first. They weren't just trying to avoid war. They were trying to prepare for something far worse. Lirian turned back to Vasquez, his voice firm. Tell me everything you know. Vasquez gave a grim nod. Then listen carefully, Captain. Because if we don't stand together, we won't stand at all. The holographic display flickered, shifting to tactical readouts of the Xal'Dar fleet. Their ships, sleek and jagged like obsidian blades, moved with unnatural coordination. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Lirian's stomach tightened. How long until they reach our space? Vasquez's voice was steady. 17 days. Maybe less if they push their drives to full capacity. Rack let out a sharp hiss. That's not enough time to mobilize the home fleet. It's not, Vasquez agreed, which is why we need to act now. Lirian studied the fleet formations. What do they want? Resources, territory. Vasquez shook her head. Extinction. That's all they've ever wanted. Lirian's eyes narrowed. How do you know so much about them? Vasquez hesitated, then tapped a command into her console. The display shifted again, this time showing a classified Terran file, a grainy recording from over a century ago. A human vessel, heavily damaged, drifting in deep space. Strange, elongated bodies moving through the wreckage. Then, static. This was the Arkansas, Vasquez said quietly. First contact with the Xal'Dar. No survivors. Reich muttered a curse in his native tongue. You've fought them before. We survived them before, Vasquez corrected. Barely, and only because they didn't see us as a threat. She exhaled slowly. That was a mistake they won't make twice. Lirian clenched his jaw. The Kior'Va Empire had always believed they were the apex of this galaxy. Now, they weren't just facing a war. They were facing annihilation. He turned to Vasquez. What's your plan? The Admiral's eyes hardened. We fight together, or we die apart. Lirian hesitated, his entire worldview teetering on the edge of collapse. Could the Kior'Va truly trust humans? Could they afford not to? A choice stood before him. The same choice Vasquez had given Reich moments ago. Attack, or stand together. Lirian took a deep breath. What do you need from us? Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. Weapons, ships, soldiers. But more than that, Captain. I need your people to believe this is their fight, too. Reich growled lowly. And if we refuse, Vasquez's expression darkened. Then when the Xal'Dar reach your homeworlds, there won't be anyone left to refuse. Silence. Then, Lirian straightened. Open a secure channel to the High Council. Tell them. He exhaled. Tell them the humans don't kill unless they must. His voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper. But this time, they must. The bridge lights flickered as the secure channel initialized. A deep, resonating chime filled the command deck, an unmistakable signal that the Kior'Va High Council was listening. A moment later, a holographic projection materialized at the center of the room. 5 Kior'Va elders, their crests high and imposing, regarded Lirian with cold, piercing eyes. "Captain Lirian," the Central Elder intoned, his voice layered with the centuries of tradition. "You are broadcasting from an enemy vessel. Explain yourself." Lirian straightened, claws twitching at his sides. "Esteemed Council, I come not with a report of battle, but with a warning. The humans are not our greatest threat." The elders' expressions barely shifted, but their silence spoke volumes. Lirian continued, "The Xal'Dar have returned." A ripple of unease passed through the council. For the first time in Lirian's life, he saw something he never thought possible: fear in the eyes of the Kior'Va rulers. One of the elders leaned forward. "You are certain of this?" Vasquez stepped into view. "We have the data to prove it," she said evenly. "And 17 days before they reach your colonies." The council's eyes snapped to her. "Human." The Central Elder's voice dripped with suspicion. "You expect us to believe that you offer this warning out of kindness?" Vasquez folded her arms. "Not kindness, survival. Yours and ours." Another elder scoffed. "The Kior'Va do not beg for aid." Lirian's jaw tightened. "Then perhaps it's time we learn." The silence that followed was deafening. Rack's mandibles twitched, but he said nothing. Even he knew the truth now. Pride would not save their people. Vasquez pressed a control on her wrist. The hologram shifted, displaying real-time footage of the Xal'Dar fleet. Their vessels, sleek and unnatural, moved in perfect, synchronized formation. Entire worlds lay in their path, defenseless. The elders stared. Lirian took a slow breath. "We have a chance to stop them before they reach us. But only if we fight together." The Central Elder's eyes burned into him. "You are asking us to trust the humans." Lirian didn't hesitate. "Yes." The Elder studied him for a long moment. Then, without looking away, he addressed Vasquez. "And tell me, you man, if we do stand with you, will you fight as we do? Will you show the Xal'Dar the same mercy you show us?" Vasquez's gaze was unwavering. "No." The air felt electric. Lirian exhaled, understanding the weight of what she had just said. Humanity had given the Kior'Va a choice. But for the Xal'Dar, there would be no mercy. The Central Elder's crest lowered slightly. A slow, solemn nod. "Then we fight." The war drums of the Kior'Va did not beat in celebration. They beat in warning. Across the Empire, battle fleets mobilized, their great warships, massive angular vessels built for dominance, now being reforged for something new: unity. Lirian stood aboard his flagship, watching the combined fleet form at the rendezvous point. Human ships, sleek and bristling with weapons, drifted in formation beside Kior'Va dreadnoughts. Side by side, enemies turned allies. Vasquez's voice crackled through the comms. "You ever fight alongside humans before, Captain?" Lirian smirked, flexing his claws. "No, but I suspect I will have stories to tell when this is over." Vasquez chuckled. "That's the spirit." Reich stepped up beside Lirian, his mandibles tight with frustration. "I still do not like this." Lirian nodded. "Neither do I." His gaze hardened as he studied the distant void where the Xal'Dar armada lurked. "But I dislike extinction more." The comms flickered again. "All ships, prepare for a hyperspace jump," Vasquez ordered. "We intercept the Xal'Dar before they reach inhabited space." Lirian turned to his bridge crew. You heard her. Power up the drives. The countdown began. 5. The fleet aligned, engines flaring. 4. Weapons systems primed, shields raised. 3. Officers braced for the jump, the calm before the storm. 2. The vast unknown stretched before them. 1. The stars blurred into streaks of light, and the combined fleet vanished into the abyss, racing toward the greatest battle in their history. A battle not for conquest, not for dominance, but for survival. The void shimmered as the fleet emerged from hyperspace, the fabric of reality rippling in their wake. And there they were, the Xal'Dar. Their ships hung in the darkness like jagged shadows, motionless, waiting, thousands of them. They did not scramble, did not react in panic as the human Kior'Va fleet arrived. They had been expecting them. Lirian's claws curled into fists. They knew we were coming. Vasquez's voice crackled through the comms. Of course they did. The question is, why? A deep pulse rippled through the void. For a moment, Lirian thought it was a weapon discharge. But no impacts, no detonations. Just sound. Then the Xal'Dar fleet moved. Not in a disorderly rush, not like any battle formation he had ever seen. They moved as one. Lirian felt a cold pit form in his gut. They're not an armady,